You just did a remaster of one of your latest albums, Whistling Past the Graveyard.
Yeah.
Could you tell me?
First of all, let me say thank you for having me. This is a real honor to be speaking with somebody at the Woody Guthrie Center, who's, of course, one of my heroes. And it's a beautiful way to start a new year. So thanks for having me.
Well, great. We're glad to have you because I think what I've listened to Whistling Past the Graveyard several times now, the remastered version, and I can't think of a better connection between that work and the work that Woody Guthrie did throughout his career.
Thank you.
We talk about, well, just the sign that's behind you. I think that, or the poster that's behind you, goes so much into what he talks about with his work and what you do as well. What led you back to this particular album? What was it about Whistling Past the Graveyard that made you that called you back to it?
That's a great question, Jerry. I recorded the record. It had some beautiful synchronicity and was filled with serendipity. I was doing a gig. I had a weekly gig, of which I'm kind of the king of in Minneapolis. It's like I've never quite figured out how to tour. I do know if you get in the van, you go to Omaha, you might die. So, like, I'd rather make a little less and sleep in my own bed at night. And so, but back in the day, I was doing 5, 6, 7 nights a week, weekly at 5 or 6 or 7 nightclubs. And I was playing in a place on the West Bank, which was kind of the spiritual center of the folk movement after it moved from Dinkytown in Minneapolis. And I moved down in 78 and was surrounded by people like Willie Murphy and Spider John Kerner and Dave Ray, who became a very good friend of mine, and Tony Glover. And the rest, it was Bill Hinckley and Judy Larson and dozens of other great musicians. And so I was doing my gig in the fall of September of 92, and Bob Dylan was doing 5 nights at the Orpheum Theater in downtown Minneapolis, which he used to own with his brother David. He had since sold it. And one night, Bucky Baxter, who was just started playing with Bob on pedal steel, lap steel, and mandolin and vocals, on his night off, asked the cab driver, he said, "Where's the best music in town?" And the cabbie, God bless whoever that was, said, "Oh, you got to go hear Paul Metsa at the Five Corners every Tuesday." I did 237 consecutive Tuesday nights there. And so this was kind of right in the middle of it. So Bucky shows up and he caught a set and he came up to me in the break and said, "I really love your music, dig your music. I've got a studio that I own in Nashville called Moondog Sound with Gary Talent, who has been with Springsteen playing bass since the beginning." And so he said, "Hey, I'll give you a really good deal on a demo tape." So he gave me a really good deal. And I bumped into this guy who had been coming out to see me. His name was Paul Mandel. Just one of those guys, you meet these friends just because they come out to see you play and you have a drink with them and you don't necessarily hang out with them after the bar closes, but you're always happy to see him. So I was talking to him the next night. I was doing another gig and we were talking. I said, "What's up with you?" And he said, "Oh," he goes, "things are well." He goes, "I had a relative pass, but I came into a little chunk of money." And I said, "Geez, I'm really sorry to hear that. Have you ever thought about investing in the music business?" And it was about that quick. And he was couldn't have been sweeter. And so he said, "What did you need?" I think it was $2,500. And he almost wrote me a check on the spot. I called up Bucky and I went down to Nashville and did 4 songs. So we had Gary Talent on bass. Bucky was playing lap steel, mandolin, and pedal steel. We'd have a fellow named George Marinelli, who was playing with Bruce Hornsby in the Range at the time, on electric and acoustic guitar. And now he's been with Bonnie Raitt for 25 years. In fact, he's on the bonus track, the new version of Slow Justice on Whistle Past the Graveyard. So we did 4 songs in about 2.5 days. I came back to Minneapolis. I played it for Paul and some of my other friends. And we all kind of decided we need to finish this record. So I went down at the end of October and we cut let's see, 7 more tracks. So it was 11 songs originally. And then after the 4 years of the debacle, which is the Trump presidency, and then the Black Lives Matter movement, and then particularly here in Minneapolis, the murder of George Floyd. I said, you know what? I said, that record that I recorded in '92 has some songs that are more politically in tune with the times now than they actually were when I recorded them. And it was already paid for in the can. So we took that and we cleaned it up. And then I thought, well, geez, I've got some new material too, so might as well put some bonus tracks on. So that's what we did. I released it on Rock the Cause Records, which is a nonprofit record label. And so now 50% of all the proceeds for the record will go to NEVA, which is the National Independent Venue Association, which is started here by my friends at First Avenue. So bless them. So we put it out, and we've been getting, some real excitement about it, some nice reviews, some good airplay, and I get to meet cool people like you. So I think it was the right idea.
Yeah, it sounds like it
is now.
For sure. And that's what I kept coming back to when I was listening to it. I really did just like keep looking back and was like, okay, when was this recorded? When was this? Because it feels like it was done yesterday,
Yeah.
last week. It's just, it feels like you said, it has gotten more timely. Were you surprised by that when you went back and listened to some of these and got ready to do this?
Well, it's kind of, yes, I was, because I hadn't listened to the record in several years. It sold out. And so I would find copies of it, original copies from the first pressing around the house, but I literally had to buy copies off Amazon and eBay. Just somebody goes, geez, I like that record of yours. I said, I'll get you one, or I'll get one for myself. So yeah, that's kind of when I started to listen to it again last year. And these songs are, timeless, right? And I'm not, I don't mean to brag here, but the subject matter, unfortunately, has never gone away, and so I just felt that not only politically was it in perfect tune with the times, but it was really probably one of my greatest recordings in terms of, I had some of the best musicians in America who we had a deep simpatico with musically, and Bucky passed away in May of last year, so I dedicated it to him. So it's kind of a tribute to him as well, and it's also probably my most quote unquote radio ready record. Excuse me, it's Sherwin Linton, an 80-year-old classic country singer, great cat. So I wanted to also bring that record and that experience and that history back to life. Oh, I'm losing your audio.
Sorry about that. How's that? Can you hear me now?
There we go. Yeah.
Great. With Slow Justice, that's the one you added some new verses to.
Well, it's funny. You should ask, because I wrote that for the first time in 1984. I wrote it for the P9 strike, which was at the Hormel plant. Hormel does spam. You know what they say about spam? Everything but the squeal. And but they had a long, protracted couple of years strike. And a friend of mine, Larry Long, who is one of the guys that kind of helped put Okima, Oklahoma back on the map. He's a huge Woody guy. We all are. Was putting together a benefit cassette. If you want to know what time it was, when you sold cassettes. And so he asked me if I had a song. I said, yeah, I'll write one. So I wrote that song. And, the first line goes, and as the world goes around, all I want to ask is, if the rich man owns the land, why must the poor man pay the taxes? And then I had a line about, women and the subjugation of women. And then subjugation of people of color. But then in 1990, I wrote another verse that I performed. You can find it on YouTube. I played at the Farm Aid 5 in Dallas, Texas in 92, and I performed my song Jack Ruby 5 miles from Dealey Plaza, I might add. And this new version of Slow Justice. And my line was, and this is on the heels of finding out that Ginny Thomas, Clarence Thomas's wife, helped send 80 buses of these insurgents to Washington, D.C. And the line that I added in 1990, the early 90s was, someday those in Congress will have to swallow a bitter pill. They believe Clarence Thomas, but I still believed Anita Hill. Now I took that verse off to put the new verse on for Slow Justice 2020, which goes, the people's house in DC is whiter than before. There's a bunker in the basement and gold locks on the door. The ghosts of slaves are marching, bleeding red and white and blue from the streets of Minneapolis to Pennsylvania Avenue. So it was, what did he do? He took a Carter family tune and put his own verses to it. So I figured, well, I could take a Paul Metsa tune and put a new Paul Metsa verse to it.
And that's a good point.
The full process.
Yeah, and that part of that process too. And you mentioned what he did was just like you mentioned earlier, seeing what's happening around you, responding to it, and interpreting it, and putting it into music, and in a way that makes it approachable and understandable. And that's what I think that folk music does and can do and has been doing for generations.
Absolutely. And it's one of the reasons why I was so attracted to it, was the connection between great songs, great musicians, and the social justice movement. Harry Belafonte, Pete Seeger, Woody Guthrie, Phil Oakes, Buffy St. Marie, Joan Baez. That's the short list, so I feel, kind of like those are my forefathers, foremothers. And so I feel, really comfortable with, my little tiny piece of the world here in Northeast Minneapolis contributing to that.
You mentioned when we were talking earlier about your connection with the Guthrie family, but I'd like to go even back further. What was your initial kind of interaction, I guess, with Woody's music itself? Do you remember how you kind of reacted when you first heard that?
Yeah, it's funny. When you first hear Woody, it's like, God, this might take a little getting used to. I mean, God bless the guy, but he's not exactly, and neither am I. I'm not Caruso either, right? And I can bang a few chords on the guitar, but I'm 65 years old, and so musicians of my generation, we got into Woody, Sleepy John Estes, John Lee Hooker, Muddy Waters, Howlin' Wolf, Memphis Minnie, Bessie Smith. We got into it through Bob Dylan, Arlo Guthrie, Ry Cooder, Taj Mahal, Bonnie Raitt. That was David Bromberg. So those guys we were listening to late 60s, especially early 70s. And you start listening to that and go, okay, where did this come from? So it was, of course, we all knew This Land Is Your Land. And one of the first things I bought, I think I was in 5th grade, back in I was a big comic book guy. And in the back, you could order, the little fish for your aquarium, or X-ray glasses, or, whatever. And so I ordered this. I think it was called Songs for Young Folk Singers by Pete Seeger. And it was a little 15 or 20 song book. And so I got that, and I had a really good teacher named Dennis Monroe, who's no longer with us. So he kind of walked me through that, turned me on to and then he gave me the New Lost City Ramblers songbook. So that became Paul at 12 and 13. Those became my first touchstones and connections back. But it wasn't long before I had my first, Woody Guthrie Folkways record. That's my nurse practitioner calling me to see how my diet's going. The daily life of Minneapolis folks. So yeah, and then once you started to study Woody and listen to him, you go, right, I get it. He's Jesus with a guitar,
Well, I wonder too, now that you've been in folk music for so long and interacted with Nora and the Guthrie family, how has your interpretation or understanding of Woody's work changed over those years? Do you
really, truthfully, we really got immersed in what I called Woody camp when Nora invited myself, and I was able to drag Dave Perner along from Solus on, my buddy, and I had hooked Nora up with my good friend Jimmy LaFave. So we went there for 3 or 4 days to Cleveland, and I got to hang out with Jimmy Longy. God bless that guy. He was in the Merchant Marines with Woody. I sat down, in fact, before we did this interview today, Jerry, I did a bunch of cassette recordings there. I've got a great one of Joe Klein and I at a coffee shop. It's about almost an hour talking about, the great, I think he was Woody Guthrie, A Life, that great book. So you got all of the scholars, your fellow musicians, and you really start to, when you put all the stories, all the people that have been touched by him in one place, this Woody camp, it was like the Woody Guthrie version of Scientology. I mean, you got indoctrinated to it in a big way. Now, I was already hip to Woody, and I did all my rereading before I went out there. I read the Leadbelly's biography by Charles Wolfe, books on Muddy Waters, all the books I had on Woody. So I was really prepared. But once you got out there, you realize, no, this guy, yeah, he's myth. He's a mythic character, but he was a real human being with all of his flaws and all of his, eccentricities and his issues. And you walk away from it. And I've told Nora more than once, I said, thank God for Marjorie Guthrie, because had she not collected all those crumpled papers in that wastebasket after Woody spent a night at the typewriter, God knows what we would have lost. So if anything, I don't think my commitment to Woody's ethos has changed at all. It's been strengthened. It's given me a spine. What gets more amazing in this day, the day when we're impeaching the president for the second time, what gets more amazing is how early Woody saw this stuff. He was hip to this stuff in the 40s, right? Mm-hmm. He was hip to it in the 30s. Mm-hmm. But he was the first one to really start writing about it and singing about it. And so what a visionary, what a complete visionary.
And I think too, he kind of was a little bit on an island out there when he was doing this in the 30s and singing these songs.
Absolutely.
What I think has happened since then is people like you and so many others have coalesced around what he started to make music say the things that it says today.
We're all sons and daughters of Woody Guthrie.
Mm-hmm. It comes back to that.
And I'm proud to say that. And it's not the thing about Woody. It's not just his music. It's when, you learn more about the man, when he's dumping over the buffet table at the rich folks party in the Upper East Side. I mean, yeah, that's a guy I can dig, singing around the pot-bellied stove at McSorley's for his drinking buddies. I've been that guy, and although I've never been to McSorley's, I hope to God it doesn't close by the time I get back out to New York City. And his connection with uh, I'm a huge Brownie McGee guy. And I started playing Sonny Terry and Brownie McGee stuff with my partner, Tim O'Keefe, who was a phenomenal harmonica player when we were in high school. He turned me on to the blues. There wasn't a lot of blues per se on the Iron Range. There wasn't like blues bands. They were in Duluth, but very few up on the range. Certainly not any acoustic blues to speak of. I heard some of it through my teacher, Dennis Monroe. But when the first day of senior high, I met Tim O'Keefe. I knew he played harmonica. I invited him to take his harmonica to school the next day. And we played for 2 or 3 hours on the steps and went back to his place. And we spent the rest of the night listening to, Muddy Waters and Sonny Terry and Brownie McGee on his cassette player. And so that became kind of, for us, a real, that was our infrastructure because we played acoustic guitar and harmonica. So that's what we did. And I've been doing it for years. And now for 20 some years, I've been playing with a really good guy named Sonny Earl. And so we're actually working on, we've got the concept. We're going to do Paul and Sonny do Sonny and Brownie. And we're going to do all Sonny and Brownie too. So I loved Woody's connection with Sonny and Brownie and, other Black musicians.
Really opened a lot of doors that and made even more of those connections that we were talking about earlier, of just where you pull those threads and where it ends up and what kinds of new music you can discover at the end of that thread.
Yeah. Well, and then, through Woody and Sonny and Brownie, then all of a sudden you get introduced to Studs Terkel, and if there was ever one man in the world I would have paid $1 million to have a martini with, it would have been Studs Terkel. But then you get hip to that whole progressive political movement, right? And so I, in a way, I've been a part of it. When we were doing the P9 strike, I was, on several picket lines with, Senator Paul Wellstone, who we miss dearly, and but it's all, folk music is really music of the people, and you look at these days, the one thing that it pisses me off, Jerry, is that the left, God bless them, I'm a lefty. I'm somewhere between Walter Mondale and Che Guevara, but the thing is, the left has never utilized the music like they should, because in my eyes, the left owns the music. They should be out here, whether it's, Midas Touch or the Lincoln Project or MoveOn.org, they should be playing Woody Guthrie tunes. They should be playing Pete Seeger's stuff. They should be playing Ani DeFranco, Bob Dylan, Paul Metsa, whatever. You know what I mean? They should be using these songs as a way to go into not the battle that we saw in DC last week, but the political battles that are as heavy now as they've ever been.
Yeah. And, you mentioned some of the bonus tracks that you had on the new album. And one of those was the Ain't Gonna Whistle Dixie No More.
Yeah, anymore. Yeah.
Anymore. Could you tell me about the new version of that you have on there? It's a collaboration with some folks up in Minneapolis, in the Twin Cities.
Yeah, no, it's great. We did the original version where I name checked Woody. I said, Woody Guthrie told us long ago, fascist born and bound to lose. And we did it with, I wrote the song, and it's got kind of a couple of stories here, Jerry. And I've always wanted to record with the Sounds of Blackness, one of the greatest Black choirs in the world, certainly in America. And Gary Hines, the director, has been a friend of mine for years. And so I had written this tune 2 days after the Charlottesville March, right where I'm sitting, right here on this table. I wrote that song in 15 minutes.
Wow.
And banged it out on my guitar. And I wanted to, I had played for 7 years at the time, almost 10 years with one of the greatest soul singers of our time named Wee Willie Walker, who just passed away about 14 months ago. And we played weekly. We did 500 gigs together. And I wanted him to sing it. He was from Memphis. He's lived that. He passed away at 78. He's lived that life. You know, he was a young black man in the South. And so we did the version at the High School for the Recording Arts with Scott Harold, who's an instructor there. Scott runs Rock the Cause Records. So anyway, their school has, I don't know, I'm guessing 90 to 100 students. A lot of inner city kids that have got bounced out of high school, couldn't quite get together, come from some, you know, real troubling home situations, but still want to get, you know, learn something about something, you know, that they can apply in their life. So they, the High School for the Recording Arts has these kids, they come in, they teach them the music business, teach them recording, help when they're producing chops. So I got to know all these, you know, young folks. They were like 17, 18, 19 years old, and mostly African-American kids. And I knew that, you know, the music we were playing, kind of the folk rock thing, was a little new to them. And, but they really, you know, they dug the sounds of blackness, and they could, you know, they could feel their own history in that. And when Walker walked in the door, they could feel he was a leader of the tribe. You know, they just knew this was, you know, their people. So one day I was sitting around, I was listening to some of the stuff they were working on, which is mostly hip hop and rap. And I was talking to a handful of them. I said, I'll tell you what, you take these tracks and hip hop the hell out of them and get back to me when it's done. I'm not going to get in the middle of this at all. So we came up with this. We had two young rappers, Little Royal Smith and Deontay Jones, uh, who both contributed verses, and they used the Willie vocal and the Sounds of Blackness vocal. And now Deontay came with his mother, emigrated from Darfur, from a really troubling, like a civil war, and ended up on the east side of St. Paul. So to show you the beauty of this country and the strength of these people, right? And the talent. So Deontay and Royals came up with these two smoking vocal rap tracks. And then we tried to hustle them around a little bit, see if we could get a big name rapper like Common or somebody on this, right? And then we didn't really get any traction. So when we were putting Whistling Past the Graveyard together with the bonus tracks, I called Scotty. I said, let's just use this hip hop version we have. It's as good as anybody else's is going to be. Mm-hmm. And when I play it for my nieces and nephews, all of which are way younger than me, they just think Uncle Paul. They call me UP. They go, UP, you are rocking now. So I finally have some credence with the kids, you know.
That's great. But I think it draws such an interesting line to, you know, I think there's a real home base for what folk music was doing in the 60s. You can find that in hip hop the last 20 years.
Absolutely.
And
absolutely. Well, hip hop is really, I mean, it's got some of the most powerful protest stuff out there.
Absolutely.
You know,
and to hear that on this album was such a neat, to hear that on this album was such a neat combination, and to have it all swirling around was just so great and encouraging.
Thank you. And it's kind of, you know, if Woody was alive today, he'd be doing the same damn thing.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I mean, you read these, you know, studying the life of Woody Guthrie is one of my passions, and I go in and out depending on what else I get involved with. But you know, Woody was really in tune and aware of and attended shows of the avant-garde. You know, Woody was aware of John Cage. Woody was aware of the work of Aaron Copland. Mm-hmm. You know, that whole Woody Rube thing, you know, Woody is Will Rogers, you know, that's taken him a long way. But there's a little more behind that curtain, you know. uh, when you start to investigate. So I have no doubt Woody Guthrie would be doing hip hop and rap right now. Well,
Yeah,
his stuff
absolutely.
was, all those talking blues tunes were rap.
Hmm.
That was the beginning rap.
Hmm. It's just it's. I think it was when I heard that, it was just such a stark. It put everything together. You know what I mean?
Thank you.
It sounded like it was great. So, for folks who are interested in the album, where could they find out more about the project and your work?
They can go to paulmetsa.com, and Metsa is, I always tell it, not a Z, it's like the New York Mets with an A at the end. paulmetsa.com, and they can get a link to the Bandcamp, links to the new record. And like I said, 50% of the proceeds are going to NEVA. They get downloads. We also have hard copies. Uh, my own stuff, I'm still working on my own Bandcamp page because I've got 12 original projects out. I have a book called Blue Guitar Highway, which once again I buy on Amazon because I sold out, which is the University of Minnesota Press put out in 2011. And I'm just finishing a book like literally this week called Alphabet Jazz, which is going to be a book of about 25 or 30 poems, 25 or 30 prose pieces, and then probably 10 song lyrics is kind of a palate cleanser between the poetry and the prose.
Great. That's exciting to hear.
Yeah, it's fun. I've taken this time. Uh, yeah, I miss playing for human beings, but I did it for so long. I've done it for 40 years. I'm enjoying the break right now.
Hmm.
And I've got a lot of archives. I've got a lot of different projects. My band Cats Are to the Stars. We've got a live record. I did my 40th anniversary last year at the Parkway Theater. I've got that on 32 track. I did a record with Big J McNeely, the tenor sax honker that we did in 2009 that's sitting there. And I've got enough songs for a new record that I'm working to hopefully get Billy Peterson and Billy Berg on, who were of course, the rhythm section for Blood on the Tracks, but more importantly, they played behind Leo Kottke in 1972 at the Guthrie Theater the night I decided to become a professional musician. Plus, they're both two old friends of mine. And Bill Berg's he's an Iron Ranger. He's from Hibbing as well. So
Wow.
anyway, so a lot of balls in the air right now.
That's exciting though. Well, it's a good time to be working on stuff and to have a lot of that focus. And I'm sure there's no shortage of material right now to create.
No. Well, it's like, no, I mean, I'm constantly, it's like, Woody's things. He'd cut up the New York Times and he'd paste them all over the walls of the house. I mean, I think most writers that write topical songs, not everything I do is topical, not everything I do is political, not everything I do is protest music, but I've ended up cutting a lot of stuff out of newspapers and writing a lot of things down just from what I'm seeing every day in the newspaper, online or on the news.
Yeah.
There's almost too much of it. I mean, it's like, wow, give me a break.
Yeah.
How about
Well,
spring training? How about spring training? Can I have spring training now?
can we start through talking about that, please? Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Paul, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it. Looking forward to seeing how all this stuff comes out. Looking forward to hearing more.
Well, Jerry, I'm very excited to be a part of the Woody Guthrie Center and Ani DeFranco's podcast. I'm very excited to come down and see the museum. I've seen pictures of it. Like I said, I met Nora Guthrie when they were just putting it together at 250 West 57th. Fred Hillerman was in one office. Harold Leventhal was in the other. Harold's wife was Natalie was working the desk, and she had all her sculptures around. So I really to see it go from there to where it is now. It's just I felt like I had an insider's look at it. So I'm very excited to see where you guys are at now. And of course, give my love to Nora
We'll
and
do. And we'll
Anna.
be thrilled to see you in Tulsa as soon as we can. Thanks.
Sounds great, man. Happy New Year.